civilian photographer that I have greater access. And I realized that once you take the uniform off and you pick up a camera, they no longer view you as a Marine veteran. You're now a journalist, and I wasn't always welcomed. I had some problems trying to tell the stories that I wanted to tell.
Like what?
One of my embeds, when I was in Afghanistan, I was embedded with an Army unit, and I was forced to remain on a forward operating base for 10 days and was never allowed to leave the base with the patrol or to go out into the community where the real stories were. So my only access to any of the locals was an Iraqi Army unit that was housed on the same forward operating base.
An Afghan?
In Afghanistan.
An Afghan Army unit? An
Afghan Army unit. So I had the opportunity to speak with them about their feelings about us being in Afghanistan and about the changes in their country. But if it wasn't for those soldiers being on the same base, I would have basically been locked out of any access with the Afghanis.
And why were they trying to stop you from meeting them?
I was told that earlier in the year they had some problems with German reporters, and they weren't happy with the story that was told, and they were no longer going to support media missions, and they were just going to wait me out.
What did the Afghan soldiers tell you?
That there's really limited opportunities for them in Afghanistan, and by joining the Afghan military elites, it's an option for some credibility, some income, some stability. But most of them, I thought, would rather be doing other things with their time. They were really separated from their families and from their communities, and they're pretty isolated when they're out serving in these forward operating bases.
Ultimately, in Basra, they got a plane to get you?
They did. They originally wanted me out that day when I was first notified, but the weather wouldn't permit them to land. So I had to remain over for about another 10 hours before they were able to get a flight the following morning. During that period of time, I was able to go out and take some photographs and interview some of the Iraqi soldiers that were getting ready to move into Basra.
But 1,000 refused to fight?
I think it was 1,300 was the last report that I'd heard.
And that is the embedded reporter, James Lee, actually a former Marine, before he was injured in Fallujah in 2004. After he was injured, he went back to Camp Pendleton. Then Hurricane Katrina hit, and he and a fellow Marine wanted to go to Katrina, to New Orleans. They were told they couldn't go, so they took vacation and they went down to New Orleans anyway. This is what James Lee described happened when he went to New Orleans.
You were shipped back to the United States. Can you talk about that time period and what you did?
Sure. After being injured, I was pulled out of my role as a rifleman, and I was assigned as an instructor running a facility at Camp Pendleton, the top Marines water survival. During that time frame, Hurricane Katrina had hit New Orleans, and I contacted my command about letting a group of Marines travel to New Orleans to assist with the rescue operations. And I was told by my command that that's not possible, that unless we're requested, we can't go.
And so what did you do?
Myself and one other Marine had put in a request for vacation time, and we both took 2 weeks off. And without our command knowing, we grabbed some equipment and drove all the way to New Orleans to help out.
Why did they say you couldn't go?
Because the Marines hadn't been formally tasked to go down there and assist with recovery operations or rescue operations, we weren't able to go as a small unit. The Marine Corps also identified New Orleans as a no-travel zone, which meant no one in the military was allowed to go there for any reason.
So what happened when you got there?
As myself and the other Marine drove to New Orleans, we contacted FEMA on our cell phone and coordinated getting a duty assignment with the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. And once we arrived in downtown New Orleans, we were paired up with other rescuers, and we began to conduct search and rescue operations in the city.
And how long did you do that for?
We were there for about 10 days, and I think on day 6 or 7, an Associated Press photographer happened to take our photographs, and those photographs ran across the nation.
What did they show you doing?
The photograph showed me talking to a displaced resident from the lower 9th Ward. He was trying to argue that he wanted to remain in his neighborhood, and I was explaining to him that we were evacuating everybody out of the area. So it was basically us having some dialogue inside of a boat.
And were you dressed as a Marine?
I was not. We attempted to conceal our identities by just wearing green flight suits. And I think the caption identified me and the other Marine as police officers.
Which are not.
Which were not.
And so what happened when those pictures ran?
Those pictures ran nationwide. They were the New York Times, LA Times. And our command ended up seeing the photograph, and they placed a phone call and ordered us to return back to Camp Pendleton.
How fast?
They wanted us there immediately. I think we drove nonstop and we got back in about 2 days.
Were you punished?
We weren't. We were told as long as we didn't let people know what we were down there doing, that we'd be reimbursed for the days that we took off, and that there wouldn't be any punitive action taken against us.
Why not?
I was told that at that point so many people in the United States were questioning why the military wasn't there, that they thought that it'd be inappropriate to punish us for what we should have been doing in the first place.
That is former Marine James Lee. I met him in Santa Barbara as we continue to be on the road. James Lee then went on to be an embedded reporter and was pulled out of Basra. He's at San Francisco State University in California. That does it for today's broadcast. Tonight we'll be in Minneapolis at St. Joan of Arc Church, tomorrow in Fresno. I'm Amy Goodman as we continue our 12th anniversary of Democracy Now! Tour around this country. This weekend in Vermont, we'll be in Montpelier and Burlington and Barrie. Check our website, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.